Hello and welcome. You're watching UATV News with me, Ksenia Bugay. First, these are the latest developments from Ukraine. Memorandum on cooperation and contracts for more than $3 billion during the official visit of President Volodymyr Zelensky to the United Arab Emirates. The Ukrainian delegation signed a number of documents aimed at cooperation in the spheres of defense, agriculture and information technologies. The head of state noted the great potential of our country and called for more active investment in Ukraine.
Attracting investments is the key to Ukraine's economic growth. The signing of a memorandum with the Mubadala State Investment Fund of the government of Abu Dhabi on the intention to invest in Ukraine is an extremely important step in paving the way for large-scale investment in Ukraine from West Asia.
An issue impossible to negotiate. Russia continues denying its participation in the armed conflict in Ukrainian Donbas and declares itself a mediator. This significantly complicates the negotiation process, says head of the Ukrainian delegation to the Trilateral Contact Group on settling the Donbas conflict, Leonid Kravchuk. Meanwhile, the situation in Donbas continues escalating. Illegal armed groups violate ceasefire and refuse from establishing a dialogue with Kiev.
Separate districts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions do not stand with Ukraine now. The self-proclaimed leaders do not hide their intentions. They want to build some states and transform them into Russia. We gather in the Trilateral Contact Group and set tasks on how to transform these uncontrolled regions into Ukraine, how to form local self-government, its features, and so on. While there, across the contact line, the task is completely different.
Ukraine responds to Russian aggression not only by military but also by legal methods. International courts are considering claims of Ukraine against Russia. Some courts have already made their judgments. The permanent representative of the president in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea noted that after the occupation of the peninsula, the Russian Federation, in fact, stole the largest oil and gas companies in Ukraine, as well as solar and wind power plants, and uses their resources.
Ukraine responds with legal remedies, and it seems to me that this is an absolutely correct strategy and, in fact, tactics. We see that the Russian Federation is probably the biggest violator of international law in the modern world, and Ukraine files lawsuits at different levels. That is, the wheels of justice are not always very fast, but they definitely need to be applied in order for us to duly bring the Russian Federation to justice for all the violations it committed and continues committing.
On February 15th, Ukraine honors the participants of hostilities on the territories of other states. It was on this day in 1989 that the Soviet troops left Afghanistan. 16,000 Ukrainians participated in that war. More than 3,000 were killed. More than 8,000 were injured. In addition to Afghanistan veterans, other military men who participated in warfare in other states are honored as well. 49 Ukrainian servicemen were killed in peacekeeping operations outside the country over the years of Ukraine's independence.
We honor those who gave their lives and their names. Their images are placed in our church. We also honor volunteers who do everything to help the Ukrainian state cope with the new disaster which has come to our land.
The daily COVID-19 rate in Ukraine is one of the lowest over the past 5 months. Over the past day, 2,332 new cases of coronavirus were registered, 2,478 people recovered. Most of the cases are in Ivano-Frankivsk, Chernivtsi and Kyiv regions, as well as in the capital. During the pandemic, over 1,200,000 cases of coronavirus disease were recorded in Ukraine. More than 1 million of them have overcome the disease. Russia took part in the acquisition of the TV channels ZIK News 1, 112 Ukraine by MP Taras Kozak, who fell under sanctions. This was stated by Minister of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine, Oleksandr Tkachenko. According to him, the Temporary Investigative Commission found out that part of the funding for the purchase of Ukrainian channels came from Russia. However, proofs cannot yet be published due to the secrecy of investigation.
During the work of the Temporary Investigative Commission in the issue of the closed TV channels, we had the opportunity to examine the documents. I was interested in the fact of their acquisition, since there is a long and confusing history of the process. I have reasons to talk about indirect financing from Russia, at least at the stage of purchase of these channels.
To remind, on February 2nd, President of Ukraine, by his decree, put into effect the National Security Council's decision on 5-year personal sanctions against MP Taras Kozak and 3 TV channels belonging to him. Personal restrictions include freezing of assets and accounts, while the channels were deprived of their licenses and stopped broadcasting. Russian funding of the Ukrainian opinion leaders in the Internet. The Ukrainian Security Service exposed 6 cyber propagandists. Those perpetrators called for the overthrow of the constitutional order and the seizure of state power in Ukraine. They received propaganda materials through prohibited Internet resources. The suspects worked in the Dnipropetrovsk, Sumy, Mykolaiv, Volyn and Ternopil regions. All of them are detained.
According to data revealed by the investigation, the perpetrators used their accounts in social networks to call to changing of the administrative border of Ukraine. We have also established the fact that 2 residents of Volyn region have coordinated their activities, running several internet communities, and used those communities to exert destructive information and psychological influence.
And New York in Ukraine's Donetsk region. The small town of Novhorodsk is seeking the return of its historical name. In the middle of 19th century, the town was named New York by the Germans, who founded it. But in 1951, during the Cold War with the United States, the Soviet government gave it a new name. Our correspondent visited the Ukrainian New York.
Any tourist can get the information about the history of the town in a local cafe. Here, in addition to coffee and pastries, Olga Myakisheva will also treat all willing with a romantic story about how the settlement got the name New York. According to legend, one of the founders of the village brought his wife from the United States here. In order to make her happier, he decided to name the settlement in honor of her home city.
This is our First Lady of New York. There she's on the photo. In case you didn't know, previously roofing tiles were produced in our New York.
According to archival documents, the founders of the village, 2 Jacobs, Nibur and Ungar, settled there in the middle of the 19th century. Here you can see the administration building of the Jacob Nibur machine building plant. It's Jacob himself, here is his son, and this is the chief engineer. 300 fellow countrymen from Lower Saxony joined them. They became the first residents of Ukrainian New York. Here in the Kryvyi Torets Gully, a brick and machine building factories were built.
The first official names one can find in the journals of the then Yekaterinoslav province. In 1859, it already mentions the village of New York.
After frequent trips to Europe and the USA, the wealthy colonists brought technologies for their enterprises. At that time, the village had quite a big potential. There was a telegraph in the village, there were brick houses and tiled roofs. Some also say that the second steam mill in the Russian Empire appeared here in New York. According to local historians, in 1941 the native Germans, descendants of the village founders, were deported. They were forbidden to return. 10 years later, New York got a new name, Novhorodsk. At present, nearly 10,000 people live here.
I was born here and lived on Patrivka Hill for 50 years. My mom lived in nearby Nelipivka, but she witnessed New York. She's almost 90.
We live here and work, and now I hope that our children will live in New York. Maybe something will change. The first step to return the historical name was made 10 years ago. Then the idea did not find support from the local residents. Only in 2016 the attempt was repeated after public hearings. The village council then voted, and the profile committee of the Ukrainian parliament supported the initiative. We hope that one day the war ends. We'll surely need changes. And yet, this name, New York, it is very interesting for people. Some have already registered their small businesses here at my request. You know, registration of the company New York could be pretty prestigious. The final step is the vote in parliament. In the meantime, the residents of the village are preparing a new initiative. They want the town with a new name to be included into the list of the tourist sites of Donetsk region. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Nadia Sukhurukova, UATV News.
A house full of raccoons. A woman from Odesa buys animals from those owners who are ready to abandon the living creatures. She has been rescuing them for 12 years and has already collected 48 raccoons at her home. To make the animals comfortable, the woman organized a separate room. Our Odessa correspondents visited the house of raccoons. This is our chief dentist.
Svetlana knows each of the 48 raccoons by name. All of them are unwanted. Odessa resident bought them from the owners who treated them badly. In most cases, wild animals are sold as domesticated ones.
First, they buy an animal and then do not know how to deal with it, saying the raccoon broke the socket, the raccoon destroyed the wardrobe. But this is normal, but not everyone is ready for this. A raccoon is not a dog, he will not lie down. It needs to do something, pick something.
It all started 12 years ago when organizing a wedding. A bride gave up the idea of taking pictures with a raccoon, which was bought for a photo. And Svetlana took the animal home. The rest were actually saved from the owners.
They tried to train this small one. It was beaten in order to obey. When the animal was brought here, it was only skin and bones. They just gave it to me. They grew sick and tired of the raccoon. And another animal was bought out by the entire company. This one was kept for several years in a small ferret cage. He couldn't walk.
12 raccoons live at Svetlana's house. She remodeled the premises of the former wedding salon in order to place the remaining 36 animals. The woman says she promised her family not to buy animals anymore, but is sure she would break her word if she finds out that another animal is in trouble. Reported by Vadim Kramer and Dana Horodentseva, UATV News.
That was our final story this hour. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned. More updates on our official website, YouTube and Facebook pages.